We are live.
This is Senate Appropriations Committee, January 30th. We're going through FY27 budget requests. And just as an update for the committee on BAA, so this today we're having testimony on next year's budget, but we're hoping to get the BAA out maybe like a straw vote by next Friday, and then get it out of the committee by the next Tuesday. So I think it's only Senator Lyons that has some possibly work in your committee to do on the bill.
Right, or we won't be looking at it until next Friday, but I'm looking at things right now, so we'll see what we have.
Okay, so hopefully if you have changes, we'll talk about.
Well, I'll do what I can, but like.
Yeah. So that's just so the committee knows what our timeframe is on that. And we'll have, so next week we'll have Robin Shy, Representative Cheyenne, and administration, Jay Fodeville, or PAs. And today, back to the budget for next year. So we have a cannabis control board in today. I'll introduce yourself.
James Pfeffer, chair of the board.
And my name is Olga Fitch, and I'm the executive director for the board. All right, so I have all the slides up, and I'm going to do my plans to walk you through those. Feel free to stop me and ask questions. So we'll start this first slide. I just wanted to include here to put out the 7 core principles that guide the work of the board. Some of you may be familiar with those, some of you may not, but that's just a brief summary of what we prioritize and what we are guided for in making all of the decisions that impact our community in the work that we do. So that's folks.
You could do make it full screen, it might be a little bit more.
It is, yeah, let's see where that button is.
Or if you just go up to the right upper right corner, and it seems like you're not doing full screen.
Let's hope.
It helps a little. Yeah.
A little bigger.
You could zoom in, but I think that's fine. I think your other slides don't have as much text.
Okay. So as you can see here, right, social equity, one of our top priorities. We always try to make sure that we do what we can to support those who were disproportionately harmed by the cannabis prohibition in their licensure, and direct them to the HDCD that administers their business development fund, where they could get the supports that they need. Bringing in small cultivators and legacy operators also high on the list. Making sure that we are focused on being environmentally friendly as much as we can and support the work of our licensees in that direction. Youth prevention and education, consumer protection, which again, with our lab coming online shortly, will be really wonderful to support that principle to make sure that all of the products that Vermonters consume are free of harmful contaminants. Medical program services. Again, as the adult use market continues to grow, we do not lose sight of the medical program and want to make sure that our patients have the services that they need. And of course, public safety on those as well. So those are the 7 core principles that we always keep in mind in all of this report. Okay. And I will now sort of jump into a couple slides. This one is a quick overview of the cannabis sales and tax trends. You've seen a variation of that slide in on my prior presentation when I was here, James, on the Budget Adjustment Act. This is just sort of graphically for you our trends in sales beginning fiscal year 23 through fiscal year 29, and then corresponding sales tax and excise tax revenue. Obviously, the numbers FY26 and below adjust the current forecast.
Can you explain why you do think it's going to keep growing?
Well, this is the GFO and administration consensus data. So that's the analysis that went into that. I think so far we've only seen the market grow. The trends are still in a place where it gives us an understanding that we could see at least the next few years some increase.
Are the other states that legalized before us, are they still seeing growth? Like is Colorado continuing to see growth?
Well,
No,
Had
they've stabilized and then, certain outside events, the pandemic, when people were staying home, they saw a spike in sales. It's fallen off since, since 2023. So, we're just still kind of on the ramp up phase where, demand is exceeding supply. We're starting to level off. As prices come down, we capture more of the illicit market. They come to the regulated market, but even JFO by their most recent revenue forecast has things really looking off by.
yeah, so still some growth.
As far as what we're receiving. And you have, assume you have data on the number of sales, not only the dollar amount, but like how
Yeah.
many individual buyers there are, right?
Yes, we have per individual business, we have that data and we can track internally to see which businesses do selling how much of what.
Like I didn't know, like is sales going up because it's just inflation? Or the people, the same people are buying more or more people buying with those kind of, maybe that went into the JFO. Yes.
I hope I'm reading the chart right.
Mhm.
It's a little hard to read, but am I right that the excise tax is 25.1 in that last instance? Okay,
That's what it is projected at, yeah.
okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. But for this coming fiscal year 27, it's $23.6 million and 10.1 sales rate. Projected. So those numbers, and the forecast was just updated in January of this year, so again, whatever data we use so far. So far, we've actually, the revenue has been higher than they've estimated in the last 3 years, so.
Better than-
Yeah.
The Economic Development Committee on the Senate side is also looking at a pretty expansive market expansion bill. That all of those strategies will inevitably would increase revenue, but it's always a balancing act as to how much you want to spend at the control board in order to receive those revenues and what the kind of public health and safety consequences are of those things.
So the other note I wanted to include here is that the sales tax revenue supports the universal school, after school and summer programs, right? So all of those funds administered by the Department of Education. And then excise tax revenue goes to the general fund, except for the 30% that goes in the substance misuse and special fund. So just wanted to set the stage here because on my next slide, I will be talking about available general type of fund revenue forecast.
Okay, so the Norris says.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just out of curiosity. Does the state dictate the prices set in each individual establishment, or do they set their own? And how is the price at the end of these things? I don't know if they call it inside like a dime buy. I don't know if they call it. Regulatory
No,
places here, whatever.
That would be old days.
That was the old days, yeah.
we have some data on like price per gram and market and basket, the average basket sizes and things like that, but really it's free market on this. I mean, it's a managed market on the supply side. We control the number of licensees there are that are allowed to cultivate. But, it's the amount of cannabis we cultivate is a little bit higher than what the leaf fee is currently. The supply exceeds the demand, which helps drive quality and, helps the price be somewhat in line with the illicit market. But as far as what retailers sell it for, they get to set the price.
So just give me an example of what that may be.
I think it's like $48 for an eighth of an ounce. Somewhere it varies depending on whether you're talking about indoor or out, the quality, the potency, the kind of the profile, the cannabinoid profile. There's a pretty big fluctuation, but I would say on average, it's about $48 per eighth of an ounce. Which is
Does that include the excess tax and the sales tax also?
Yeah.
Okay.
this is following on the same line, but a little different. I'm just wondering, the strategic decision was made to have lots of licenses available, regardless of whether they bump up against each other geographically. So for instance, Burlington, on Church Street, there were 5 to 6 outlets. Do you show yet people who are exiting the business?
I think we've had 6 retailers, just talking about retail, I think 6 exit. None of them, I don't think any of them cited economic reasons. It was some of them, one of them was a compliance issue. Well, I guess one of them wasn't an economic reason, but there's other issues going on there, but we're not seeing a huge drop off. I think that if the retailers were permitted to expand and not be just in the towns that have opted in, they would, and then you would be inevitably capturing more customers.
Sure.
Because price, convenience, different things that drive consumer choices. You have to drive 30 miles round trip to purchase regulated cannabis, or just walk down the street to your neighbor. It's home grown.
But in other words, you're not seeing that, a relative profusion of licenses is leading to Hunger Games among Mr. buyers.
It depends on who you ask, but no, I mean, we're not seeing, I think one indicator that would be true is that the retailers would be drastically lowering their prices in order to outcompete other retailers.
Well, I have seen that, over the last 3 years. I'm thinking here just about pre-rolled, cannabis.
Yeah.
Has gone from, $19, $18 down to $7 in some cases. That's healthy. I mean, you want the consumer to have a low price. I just thought it must be coming with some people falling below the viability.
I don't think we're there yet, and we have put a pause on issuing new retail licenses. We're very mindful of the retail density problem. And you gave us a little bit more rulemaking authority to make sure that when an existing retailer wants to change locations, they're changing locations to a place that doesn't exacerbate that retail density problem. So better geographic distribution.
I would argue with you that's a mixed bag. In a community like Morrisville, I think in the village of Morrisville, when you've had, I know 5, but I think there were 6.
There were 6.
And the drop, have they dropped one?
That was the one with the compliance issue.
Well, it's not only a compliance issue, but I think when you have 6 in the village of Morrisville, with the size of the village, that's a lot.
We would absolutely agree. The original cannabis bill had 0 authority for us to regulate where they were going. We would have loved that authority, honestly, to limit, to cap the numbers that were allowed in certain areas of the state. I think that bill, the legislature that passed that, assumed that locals would pass ordinances to stop the density from happening. But I think everything rolled out too quickly for them to get ahead of that.
Okay, so I'll continue. So this slide I wanted to include here, because this indicates the difference between what's projected as the total excise tax revenue and what will actually be available in the general fund to you, because this accounts for the 30% substance misuse prevention special fund allocation. So again, if you're looking at, say, $23.5 million as an excise tax revenue for fiscal year 27, you're really only looking at $16.5 million available in that fund, because the rest is going to that special fund. So wanting to flag that, but sometimes that gets lost a little bit in numbers. And then now the note they just included to sort of remind this group that CTV will rely on its collection of fees, fines, through our special funds to cover 1/3 of our operating budget. And then 2/3, we will be reaching out to the general fund for appropriations. So somewhat indirectly, we'll be dipping into that excise tax revenue to cover 2/3 of our operating costs. That's how sort of the structure was slightly different from prior years, but just wanted to flag that.
So you do pull, make sure I understand what you said, that you are pulling your, is it always just a third, or that's just the way it works out from the exit?
It's just the way it works out that we usually collect up to $2.6 million in fees and revenue, in fees and fines, through the licensing and compliance activities. And our budget, as you'll see, is around $7 million. So it means about a third of it is something that we can cover through fees, and the 2/3 is something that we have historically covered through the excise tax revenue. Before it would drop, the remainder would drop in the general fund. But now that the entire excise tax revenue goes to the general fund first, we'll be working with the administration to ask for appropriations from the general fund.
And then the fees and penalties,
Mhm.
money, you get those directly
Yeah,
from the regulated market.
exactly. Annual fees, relicensure, application fees, product registration fees, and any administrative penalties we collect from the community. Yeah.
So you will continue to draw on the excise tax. Right?
So indirectly, we will continue to, and I think I put it in there, it's about $4.5 million. We didn't see, in next slide, some of more.
But why would it be, why are you saying it's from the excise?
Well, I meant it's sort of, it will be out of the general fund,
Okay.
but sort of indirectly,
Yeah,
you know,
so just making sure I
no, we can't really, separate.
kind of lowers what's going to the excise.
Exactly. That's what I think is a better way to put it.
Our fees have never been fully re-examined since they were set. There was a conscious decision in 2022 to set them not equal to our operating expenses, but to kind of discount them so that it would create a more accessible market. I know there's been talk about re-examining fees over the years, and we did a few analysis before that was submitted to the finance committee and finance committee last fall. So there may be conversation about increasing some fees, decreasing others, bringing in more revenue for the fee.
And when you say top, you mean within the control board or within this building? Like
Within this building.
What's
Interested in why fees would be intentionally set to not cover your costs.
It was, the decision was made that, it was actually the JFO report that examined various fee proposals that we put forward to the Ways and Means and Finance Committee. Because the directive to us was, create a market structure and fee schedule and try your best to set the fees that they would cover the operating expenses. If that's impossible, have a alternative fee structure. So we put forward two proposals. JFO evaluated them. JFO at the time found even if you set them astronomically high, the depressed entrepreneurial interest in getting into the market would probably still not cover the CCB's budget. So you might as well just try and focus on creating a more vibrant market that is accessible and generate sufficient revenue. So,
Try to bring in the legacy operators, encourage their participation. And of course, when we have social equity applicants, we wanted to help those out. So their fee structure is different to encourage them. So then, so the decisions.
but fees generally do get reevaluated from time to time. I think
we're supposed to?
the appropriate committees have a report from us about what they're bringing in, who's paying what, relative profitability of various license types.
Okay, all right. So next, right here is sort of that summary of our budget ask. So as I mentioned, about 2/3 of our budget ask will be covered through the general fund appropriation, and about $2.5 million is what we expect to cover through the cannabis regulations fund. And then I also include a little overview about staffing as we are locked in currently. So We have 5 exempt positions that includes the board, executive director, and general counsel. We have 16 folks who are dedicated to their compliance licensing and medical program agents who work with their licensing and applicants and patients. 4 business office data and outreach folks that support the operations, and we have 3 positions, 3 folks working in the lab. So that is 20 staff total. Good.
Yeah,
Questions?
it's good. Just one, does the board member, their salary go by tenure or is it flat?
It's set in statute. The chair is 2/3 of a Superior Court judge and the 2 other board members are half.
That's that. Okay.
This. I'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so this one. So I tried to focus this slide on the increases that you are seeing in our budget. So to kind of summarize it and make it a little bit easier. So we are looking at 9.4% year-over-year increase, which and for our budget is just over $600,000. And I included a short breakdown here, sort of where those increases specifically coming from. About a third is tied to personal services, so salary, wages, all of the benefits that come up to about 202. And then about 400,000 is in operating costs, with the largest chunk of that devoted to the lab. So I think we discussed it a little bit before. We finally have our lab. We got on the lease last summer. The lab is set it up. We have our equipment. We just hired our 3rd lab team member, and we're in the process of getting things up and running by this summer. So now what we need the actual supplies that any lab would need, and that's what we are looking for. That yellow box over here is a quick summary of what those things are, sort of quick representation of what are the lab costs. And I broke them down into 2 sections. One, the top sections is on subscriptions and maintenance costs. So for example, the information management system will have an annual fee, comes with its own maintenance contract. So we'll need to account for that. Same goes for that proficiency subscription, when we'll have a vendor come up twice a year to run their tests. And then of course, something like a waste removal, we'll need to have a contract with a vendor because we have flammable solvents and other things that need to be removed off site, etc.
What is the DLL MOU?
DLL will use our memorandum of understanding with DLL to help support Department of Liquor and Lottery. Yep, to help support our operations in the field. We lean on them when we have a tough situation, say our agents don't feel safe going out in the field to do a cessation of operation with the licensee. So we will have a member of the DLL team sort of present. And
And the DLL also does your age checks. Like
yes, they don't, we don't rely on that service but yes, if we needed to, that's what we will go to. We've done it a few times. We usually use them for enforcement activities, not as much for compliance.
Is this increase, is the lab cost why your sales have gone up like 4%, but your total budget increase is 9%? Do you attribute that difference to the lab, or why the 9% increase?
Why? I would say, lab increase, if without the lab, it would have been at about 5% increase. So lab is taking up the largest chunk. And so then personnel expenses and then a little bit of ADS. Again, we are working with ADS on a few projects and with another 100,000, I think that we need budget for to keep things going.
So just so the rest of the board members will know, per our conversation, we can anticipate that this lab cost is not a one-time fee, it's an ongoing, it's pervasive.
These operating expenses are ongoing. The equipment is BAA expenditure. The one-time expenses for the lab are done.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
But-
drop a lot of beakers or what were
We'll try and keep the drop beakers to a minimum.
Um, any other questions about this page? I think, okay. And the rest I have for you is the actual, report that finance management folks provided to me. And again, I can walk you through this, but, I tried to capture that in the prior slide so that you could look at so you look at the first table and the total amount, like total difference between FY 27 and 26 is 202, which is what I tried to present to you in the prior slide. And that's our salary wages, contracted third party services. That's captured. And then the second table is where we are capturing the increases related to ADS. And I highlighted in orange, the places where you are seeing those increases, specifically, and again, those are tied to our IT costs. And then other purchase services category, 83.3% is where we are capturing lab expenses related to subscriptions and maintenance of the lab equipment. And then the supply category, which represents almost 500% increase, is where the lab consumables are captured. So again, we are tracking those separately to make sure that we have a good handle and understanding of what is the cost of the consumables versus various subscriptions that we need to in the lab. So
On the next page, what are your grants?
grants is that, grants is that contract with DLL. So we are looking at,
You classify it as a grant, but it's an MOU.
yeah, that's how finance management tracks it and wanted us to account for it. So I'm not sure.
That's crazy people at finance.
That's, yeah. But that's about it, in terms of, so you could see the totals. And that's the 9.4%. Again, our budget is not very large, so the 600,000 increase with lab being about 250 of that is really what's sort of pushed it towards that 9.4%. Because we did not have anything budgeted for the lab in the prior fiscal year. So we're going from $0 to $250,000 in operating costs.
Yeah, I mean, on your enforcement, it's 16 staff, I think you said.
It's, licensing, enforcement, and medical. So it's 16, but we have 10 dedicated to compliance and enforcement.
Do you track it, like what the compliance costs are per vendor, for licensing?
We don't
We could,
really,
we could just do the simple math. of
yeah,
Finding out the total number by the number. But I wonder if you track that and how that compares to other states or anything like that.
I have done that analysis to just the FTEs per licensing,
Right.
and we run pretty lean compared to almost every other state. I haven't tracked it to like DLL or,
Right, I
other
wonder-
state agencies.
I assume you have more,
DLL, I think is 13.
more
lines.
compliant, more rigorous
Licensees. compliant.
But maybe, I mean, will you equate them to be equal, what they do to their licensees and what you do? You don't know.
I don't know enough about the
Yeah.
day-to-day work of a DLL compliance officer. It is a somewhat unique field
Right.
that we are dealing with because we need to be experts in agricultural practices, pesticides, and then food manufacturing, sanitation, food
Right,
safety.
seems like there's more going
Going on
on.
retail, yeah, I've said it many times, in an ideal world, these three kind of areas of the supply chain would be split between three existing state departments. None of them are willing to actually
Right.
step from the cannabis establishment because of the federal entanglement, federal conflict.
And do you inspect each licensee every year, or is it just like?
Multiple, everyone, we are required to do at least annually, but they oftentimes need snap inspections.
And these are just unannounced, they'll just show up.
both. Yeah, sometimes announced, sometimes unannounced. And then investigative work, obviously, if we have complaints, we send agents to investigate those.
And do you have any performance metrics?
It's a good question. We have been working with our consultants. So we hired a consultant to help us with the supply and analysis. And as a part of their work, they also sort of evaluated the structure of our agency and have suggested some KPIs for us. So the report is fresh off the press in the last months or so. So we are going to be officially, turning to utilizing some of those suggestions. To date, we definitely do what's required for the budget cycle, but some of those are ratios, some of those are what's the compliance rate, right? Out of our, for example, inspections, how many result in investigations, how many pass with flying colors. So we have those measures for sure.
And you have, there's ways for people to complain or like address.
They have a web forum.
I assume you track those that come.
Yes, so we
Complaints a year.
Yes, and I think I presented, yes, so we definitely have total complaints, how many of those result in investigations and violations, so those things are definitely available. For everybody to.
I would assume that would be a performance measure you could
We,
come,
yeah,
something similar, or just general customer satisfaction.
yeah, yes, that's probably, important.
Any other questions or anything else you want to say? Yes, Senator?
Just out of curiosity, are your investigators civilian personnel?
Yes. We pulled them from Agency of Agriculture, Department of Health. We've tried to cover the expertise that the compliance needs and cross-train all of our compliance.
You can hold them or you coach them.
Yeah, well.
Senator Rick.
And last question, I just happen to think, do you like DLL, do you do people who go in with a fake ID and try to get through the system? Cigarettes?
A little bit. I mean, we certainly investigate the complaints of that and try and do it. But we haven't done systematic, they're not supposed to be called stinks anymore.
Right.
We don't systematically do it, but we,
Not that I'm advocating for it, it's just.
No, we've relied on DLL, so we've had complaints, and when we've gotten a complaint and it seems serious, we would work with DLL, so they can send somebody from their team. We just don't necessarily have the staff, and our agents are constantly in the field, so they wouldn't even be able to pass it, an intermediate person. That just wouldn't work. There's so few, really, the same 7 people who've been with us from the beginning, haven't had any turnover on that team. Talking wood, they're amazing, but they just been well to known, and but DLL is also on purpose.
DLL doesn't same Senator Norris's question. They don't have they're civilian inspectors. Like they don't have sworn officers, do they? Have sworn
I thought they
They do. Have sworn.
you're compliant with
Yeah.
support officers, but the people that do the stings are
Yeah.
sorry, not stings, but
Right.
they contract with the service that uses kids.
So there.
Okay.
Some of your.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? The Cannabis Control Board, anything else? Thank you. We should have asked you that we didn't ask you.
I mean, the only thing I think that's good news, I know the revenue is never enough, but we did exceed, if you go back to JFO's 2023 forecast, when the market was just 2 months old, they projected 3 years out. We've exceeded those projections every single year by at least 40%, 70%. So the market is strong. The revenue is never enough. It's not, fixing any major issues. It's more about plugging holes. But I think there's going to be continued growth. And again, we are leaving quite a bit of money on the table in certain areas, but there are areas that would require debate and policy choices.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think I saw that the auditor had done it, we can,
Do we have the deputy on?
I don't know. He was here the other day, but
Yesterday.
You here in person?
he was here yesterday in person. I mean, so
That's what look like it, chicken.
you can ask the auditor. Does he know where his deputy is?
Good question.
You should put it in tracking call.
It's too cold to be skiing.
I'm sorry, that's on a need to know basis, okay?
Okay, so yeah, now we're gonna hear the budget request from the auditor's office. We have the auditor with us, so. We'll let Mr. Hopper just give us his presentation.
Thank you very much. And first, let me say, I appreciate you allowing me to testify remotely. I have some vision issues and I'm trying to limit my time on the road, so thank you. Our budget, as is always the case, is pretty straightforward. There's nothing fancy. There's no federal money. We have no programs, no divisions. We have three sources, actually two and a teeny add-on. The largest by far is our internal service fund, which reaches almost everybody in state government, not the lottery folks and a few others, but generally speaking, everybody. And the methodology for that, it's called the SARF, the Single Audit Revolving Fund. The methodology for that is approved whenever we make changes by both the fifth floor and OMB in Washington, because it covers single audit stuff as well. And the advantage, by the way, of the SARF, in addition to spreading the cost around, is that those entities that receive federal funds in most cases can apply some of it towards the payment of the SARF to us. So it's not general fund. And our general fund this year has declined quite a bit for a reason I'll explain, but it's now under $300,000. We had a position when I took office in 2013 that was exempt, and my predecessor used it for PR. And that didn't seem like a good use of a body to me. So I repurposed it into an investigatory guy or gal. And it worked a couple of times exceptionally well. The first was Andrew Stein, who later became my second deputy and now is kind of the CFO at the tax department. Really bright guy, great writer, good researcher. And I really enjoyed having him in the job. And we got a lot of good product from him. A couple of others in between weren't as good. And then we had a woman named Fran, who's over at AHS Central, also just as good as Andrew. So it was a mixed bag. And the last fellow we had didn't really work out and was more work and trouble than it was worth. So I realized unless the auditor or the deputy are ready to devote a lot of time to this position, I thought it would add value and add product. That sounds bad, product, but in the end, I think the best choice is what we did. I did something that very few appointing authorities ever do. I gave up an exempt position and I had it turned into a classified senior auditor, and we are recruiting for that position now. So that cost goes into the SARF, the Internal Service Fund, and is taken from the general fund. So the general fund cost is down. Other than that, there's almost no changes. It's all pretty much status quo.
What was your total budget changes percentage? I don't see that on your one pager.
I'm sorry, it's under 3%. We met the governor's request. I love to follow the rules, you know.
Good characteristic for an auditor. Yesterday, we were talking about your audit of BGS energy program, which I appreciate. I found that enlightening. We talked to BGS about it. But is there anything else that you would want to highlight of your work or your budget?
Well, you might get a kick out of this. As you may know, we did 3 jobs that were about different entities in state government that have programs to serve consumers who have complaints. One was the Department of Health, Food and Lodging. One was Public Service Department. They have a complaint program, as you know. And the other was the insurance division of DFR. And 2 of those, DFR and PSD, on balance, did a pretty good job. And the Department of Health wasn't that far off, but there's room for some improvement. I'm sure they will. But the audits were not covered by Vermont Digger. And over the years, VT Digger has been a pretty reliable partner, as it were, in presenting or sharing our work with the general public. Now, you guys know we get it to you and we get it to the administration. And I also have a newsletter that goes to about 13,000 people. But I was very disappointed that Digger didn't cover those 2. So I waited a few days and sent him a note. And I said, I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's because the legislature's back and you're overworked and you always have to make choices. Maybe it's because the findings were generally positive, and I know the media prefers conflict. And I just threw that out, but he wrote back and said, "You're right. A positive finding we take is status quo and we're not going to cover it." I was deeply offended because, here's an anecdote. About a year after I started the job, I was at the golf course and some guy I hadn't seen in ages was over at a nearby green. And we had just released an audit report and had been covered in the news. And there were some unfortunate findings. And the guy yelled at me and said, "Hoffer, why don't you just tell us what works?" And I laughed, ha, 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 but that represents a vision or an idea of state government that continues, which is state government is corrupt and incompetent. And I don't want to be the guy that helps, create or maintain that view because I don't believe it. It's wrong and I hate it. So with that in mind, I was deeply offended that VT Digger would think it doesn't matter if we tell people when state government does a good job. That really pissed me off. So I'm sorry to take your time, but
That's fine.
those were, modest audit reports. We have another one in that same vein coming out about the Attorney General's CAP program, the Consumer Assistance Program, which is a partnership with UVM, and that's kind of a mixed bag. You'll see that probably in a couple of weeks. We also have a job that's almost done about veggie, something I've dealt with many times over the years. In fact, wrote the first or was the primary author of the first report on veggie's predecessor, the EATI, back in 1998, when I did some contract work for then Auditor Ed Flanagan. So it's kind of in my DNA. In any case, there is an element of the methodology that's used to determine not eligibility for the grant, but the size of the grant. And we now have some really interesting and up-to-date and data that hasn't been available in years past to answer the question, well, Phil, your company is applying for money, and there's a principle embedded in the statute very clearly that we're not supposed to pay you if you would have done this anyway. That's the but for eligibility. The other is that the amount that we award should not include what is considered measurable background growth. Well, in the old days, they didn't have a way to measure that because the tax department's record keeping and the IT systems were not up to the task. Now they are. So what they did is use for all of the applicants an industry average. So if all the widget makers in Vermont averaged an annual growth rate of 3%, that would be applied to the applicant and their award would be reduced by that amount. And that's all they had to work with. And I complained about it over the years, but they said, "Oh, we have nothing to do." Well, I asked the question again about a year and a half ago. And as it turns out, Tax's new system can answer the question and tell us, what is the immediate history prior to application for an applicant. And it's not necessarily directed, the report, to the council about the but for. It's directed to the Joint Fiscal Committee, which has statutory authority for the methodology. And I think it's pretty clear that it's time for a change, but you can read it when it's done, and it is almost done. And of course, we always give it to the auditee for review, so it'll probably be 3 or 4 weeks. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I'll be interested to read that when it comes out.
We also have a number of other projects under consideration because we have a lot of jobs that have been completed at more or less the same time. So we'll see how that sugars out in terms of the risk assessments that are underway, which reflect an analysis before we make a decision. So it'll be a little while before we answer all those questions. But the good news is, we've had some retirements in the last 4 or 5 years and have been extremely fortunate to replace all those lost folks with some really excellent staff from all over the country. And, it's not surprising to me, but it's kind of interesting to think back on your former colleague and my personal friend, Michael Sirotkin, who was a big promoter of this, let's pay them to come. Well, I'm not supposed to get personal with applicants when we're interviewing them, but I typically say, you don't have to answer this, but I'm curious why you are from Louisiana or Ohio or Washington or Tennessee, and you want to move and that's your life. That's where you grew up. That's where your family is. Why do you want to move to Vermont where you know no one? And almost every single one of them says, I don't want to raise my daughter in blank, fill in the blank. They want to be in Vermont for a lot of reasons. It's a beautiful place, great quality of life, but the tipping point in some cases is that we offer some social and cultural things that other states don't. And you can't make that part of your economic development strategy, except do the rest of it as best we can. So I feel good about the office. I'm going to be gone in a year, as you know, and I think we've done some good work, and the crew is good. I'm glad we could, expand by another body, because there's no shortage of work to be done, of course.
Is your office involved at all about the general effort to maybe restart the committee on, what do we call it, the GAC? I can't remember when it's the kind of accountability and the performance reporting and all, like, how can we
Yes.
better?
Yes, indeed we are. And it's been an interest of mine. In fact, the first job I did for Flanagan back in the 90s was on performance measurement in state government. And we now include performance measurement in our objectives for almost every audit we do. And I'm happy to say that after following this over the years, I think the state, the administration, which has the office that is responsible for this statewide, has made some progress after a lot of false starts. And I know one of the false starts, unfortunately, was the ledge effort. There are people who are still talking about that, and Tim and I encourage them every chance we get. It represents a responsibility, I think, of the legislature, but it does involve commitments of resources, which is always challenging. But I did something the other day in House Commerce, and I'll do more of it. I wanted to go a little bit further with performance measurement than Justin, the fellow at the office on the fifth floor, does. The interesting initial predicate question is, are the measures honestly reflective of the goals of the program that you guys create and is being measured by the department or the agency? That's always the most important question. Sometimes it's not. But even if it is, do they measure actual outcomes or not, or just output? It's easy to measure how much you do. It's much harder to measure how well you do. So I said, maybe I can help. So I looked at 6 programs from the Department of Economic Development and was shocked to learn that 2 of them actually report what is characterized as performance data, but it's not. It's from the applications of businesses seeking money. They make no effort to follow up. There's no due diligence after the company works through the program, whatever. And I won't tell you what they are now. I'm not done with the memo, but that really shocked me. So we may do yet another job on performance measurement, because I just think, it's such an incredibly valuable tool for the program managers, for policymakers, and for the general public. So I care about that a lot. I know Tim does too. So we'll see.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I think we need help on that. And I think the auditor's office is the right place to help the legislature figure out the best way forward on this.
Well, thank you.
Okay, any other questions about the auditor or the deputy auditor?
Can I just say, this is a whole new world. The last time, or I think 2 years ago, I was here, you guys were still talking about who had the better cookies from your constituents. It's a different crowd now.
Yeah. Well, we're working on our performance measures. Discussions of cookies was
that was about morale, I think, basically.
We just asked about performance measures on the golf course.
That's about my handicap, and it's not what it used to be at all.
No, I neither.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. If you have any more questions, you know how to find me.
Yeah, well, and thanks for all your service in the office, and hope you have a good retirement.
I hope so too. Thank you very much. Take care.
Okay, well, we can go offline for our 10